Hey guys, welcome to a pro wrestling podcast with Matt and friends. I am joined today by none other than the great TJ Perkins. TJ, how's it going, man?
It's going all right. I'm gonna fix my levels here.
You had a little bit of a busy travel month, huh?
Yeah, well, I mean, my schedule has not slowed down really any over the last year or so. I'm generally on the road 2.5 to 3 weeks out of every month. So yeah, I just came off of let's see, two motion capture shoots for 2K games, and then sandwiched in between there was like an Impact TV tapings week, and then New Japan tapings as well. I have a week off, and then I head back to the studio in San Francisco for 2K games, and then another week in Nashville for Impact, and then another week in LA for New Japan.
So just crazy busy, man. Just crazy busy.
Yeah, the train keeps moving.
Yeah, I mean, dude, more power to you. I mean, like I said, I've been a big fan of your career. I've watched you. I mean, to see what you're doing now is fantastic. I've watched a lot of your interviews with other people, the Chris Van Vliet show, stuff like that. And I heard the stuff that you were talking about, like how with like WWE, you never even wanted to originally sign with them.
Yeah, yeah, I kind of always thought it would be a pit stop, and that's sort of what it ended up becoming. It almost wasn't. It almost wasn't one.
No, I mean, I'm glad it did, man, because you know what? My ex-fiance now got to see who you were. You know, she only watched wrestling with me. And actually, you know what? I rooted for you the entire competition. And when you pulled it through, because I honestly, the way they were going with it, I thought it was going to be Zack Sabre or Kota Ibushi.
Right, yeah.
I was like, well, I really think it should be TJ because he's busted his ass for years already. And to see you get to that finals against, wasn't it Grand Metalik that you were in the finals with?
Yeah, I asked for Zach actually. Well, I asked for Zach or Metallic, but I asked for Zach first, but I think they kind of chose Metallic out of the two. But yeah.
No, dude. You know what? I hate watching Grand Metalik now because he's got so much potential, and they put him in the Lucha House Party, and they just completely took a shit on it. I love Lindsay too. Don't get me wrong; they're both great. I just think the Lucha House Party just needs to go away.
Yeah, I think they also kind of feel like they ran their course with it. Those guys are actually like they were my best friends there. I mean, other than like, Swan and also Cedric. And I remember them coming up with the concept for House Party and like filming all those vignettes themselves and really having to like kind of DIY it and like put this all together and pitch it to Vince. I remember them going in for their pitch meeting and everything. And I think at the time it was good for Metallic because he needed to be able to show them that he wasn't just the guy that they signed, that there was like other layers to him.
Yeah.
And Lindsay, of course, I mean, he's like, God, he's the funniest person I've ever met. he's such an outgoing person. It's almost a shame that he's under a mask because he's so charismatic and funny. And I think that they both kind of know now that like they probably did as much as they could with it, and that if they want to keep doing it, it has to sort of like turn into something different and evolve. And I do think that Metallic, especially, I know that he feels sometimes unfulfilled, like he kind of wants to be able to get back to what he knows he can do, which is why a lot of the times I would love when I had the chance to wrestle them, because especially with Metallica, is like I would always tell them, look, you can take the reins off with me, man. I'll get all your stuff. Yeah, I'll make sure you get to be you tonight,
Right.
But yeah.
No, you always put on great matches, man. You know what? It was funny because when you teamed up with Mike Kanellis for a little bit, for anybody that doesn't know, independent wrestling was Mike Bennett. I honestly enjoyed that team, and it made me feel kind of like, was it something that they were just kind of like, well, we have nothing for you, so we're going to pair you guys up together?
Yeah, I think the idea was me versus Lucha House Party. So it's like I needed somebody, and and that was sort of kind of a natural fit, I guess, just because he I don't know that he had anything to do, and he's part of a 2-person act, and so it felt like that might fit really well. And I think that with the way that I was as a character, it sort of suited Mike a little bit. Like a lot of people were putting up early DX, like not memes, but like comparison pics where it'd be like Sean Hunter in China and then like me, Mike, and Maria. And it was so like eerie. Some of the shots were almost exactly the same. Like there's like the picture of Hunter in China moving Sean out after like a run-in, and Sean like has his arms up and they're kind of like carrying him out. And then we had that exact same shot on a 205 after running in on Lucha House Party, and we didn't intend it that way, but it just ended up looking that way. And I was even wearing the black and green tights and stuff at the time, which was also not intended. But so we were trying to have fun with it because we knew that it was sort of pieced together. But I'd known Mike for years, so it was fun to be able to work with him and Maria. Like I really loved them to death. So
it was I thought it was entertaining, and I used to when I played 2K19, because that was the last game you were in. For WWE. When I played it, I played as
the last good one.
Yeah. 2020 was not that great, man. I still play it regardless, here and there, but I get bored with it, with all the like glitches and shit. It gets, very irritating. So
they're reworking everything. So the next one should be good.
Is that what you're working on, 2K20 too?
Yeah, and whatever future. I mean, a lot of it is general like work, like for them, but that is obviously what they're programming right now. But yeah, they were going through a transition period with the development companies and stuff at the time for 2K20, so they kind of got left holding a bag that they weren't able to hold. So like now I think they'll get a better one out next time.
I'm hoping so, because I love WWE video games are the best.
That AEW game seems like it might be pretty great too. I hear that they're actually going to go back to where it's like animated, all the motions, like how like No Mercy was, where it wasn't like motion, it wasn't motion captured, so it doesn't feel like a simulation. It feels more like all the animations will be done like through just the animation design. So
I'm hoping. Cool. I'm hoping. I mean, with AEW, man, I've never I just started getting more into it. When AEW started, and I don't like dissing companies because I'm a big wrestling fan. I've actually personally tried out for wrestling before. Ended up getting a concussion my first day, so I was like, I'm done.
Welcome to the club.
Yeah. So I actually had back-to-back concussions before training, like 3 concussions before that. So when I got in there and I hit my last concussion, they were like, "Yeah, I wouldn't do it anymore." And I was like, "Well, that sucks." It's always been a dream of mine, but this is fantastic doing this podcast, getting to talk to people like you. But with video games though, man, with AEW, what kind of irked me with them, and I don't know if like you ever paid attention to it or not, is they tried in the beginning to be super flashy. And it was one of those things that, and I'll never forget it. It was a 6-man tag match that they had. It was Omega and the Young Bucks versus the Death Triangle, Pac, Phoenix, and Pentagon. And it was funny because they were throwing super kicks, and literally within 5 seconds, they got right back up. And I was like, dude, like you should have sold that super kick, man. Like you just got kicked in the face. And then it was one of those things too, like being a big wrestling fan, with the shots that they took at WWE, instead of focusing on their product as a whole, kind of put a sour taste in my mouth, because it was like one of those things, like focus on your product, because you're new.
I think a lot of the consensus, especially amongst my peers, is sort of like to just kind of do you. It's one of the reasons why I really liked like returning to Impact. I mean, my goal before, like we spoke at the top of the podcast, like I never expected to go to WWE, or rather, I didn't expect to stay. And my goal at the time was, I had just gotten out of Impact TNA at the time, and I really wanted to go back to Japan and Mexico. It'd been years since I was really like in Japan and Mexico. And, I ended up staying in WWE. When I left, a year or so ago, my goal was obviously to go back to New Japan, where I kind of started. But, it was really a no-brainer to add Impact to that list, because they're so like, dedicated to just worrying about themselves. Like they never really care about trying to compete with anything specifically or trying to fit into a mold of what, this sort of bullshit competition is. Like, nobody wins. Like, nobody wins. Like,
It's wrestling, man.
yeah, it's going to go on forever. Like, nobody wins. And if we define winning by like putting somebody out of business, then who really wins? Like, no, we all lose then,
Right. Everybody's going to lose a job and stuff.
Yeah. So like, and even the winning side loses. I mean, like, one of the worst things to happen to WWE was when WCW went under. Like that was the ripple effect is bad, I think. So what I really love about Impact is that they've always been like, they'll make a joke here and there or whatever, but they've always been very like, we're just going to do what we do, and if you like it, buy it. If you don't, then you don't have to stick around. So I love that about them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was funny because I was just watching a backstage clip from Impact with Scott D'Amore, Brian Myers, and Matt Cardona. And Scott D'Amore's like, eye for an eye match. Who does that? Like, and he did a play at Rey Mysterio and Seth Rollins. He's like, and then you come back out of nowhere a couple weeks later and you're okay. And I was like, dude, that was perfect, because they don't focus. You guys don't focus on dissing other companies. You guys focus on just making yourselves a company in yourself.
And I think they don't take themselves too seriously. And I like that about the environment. There'll be jokes like that, but I think that we often take jokes at ourselves as much as we would about anything else, which is, for me, especially, like, I mean, I'm like living Deadpool by nature. Like, so that's right in my wheelhouse to be, facetious in that way.
That's true, man. Now, question with Impact, how would you look at Impact? Would you look at it as the third like top show like an AEW, WWE, or would you look at it more of a high definition indie wrestling? Because ever since I think Slammiversary last year, when things started getting the ball rolling big time again, that's how I viewed it, is a high definition Impact or indie wrestling, which is great. Because it's not trying to compete with an AEW or WWE. You guys are trying to be yourselves.
Well, I guess it kind of depends on how you would define, indie wrestling. Like, in the technical sense, anything that isn't WWE would be independent wrestling if you're using one flag as the majority, right? So you can't have more than one majority. So there's either one majority and everything is independent outside of that, or everything is independent, including WWE. So it's kind of like it depends on how the person would define that. I think maybe at one point you would say that it sort of was that way, in the sense of a lot of the roster were people that were like not under any one banner. But now their roster is built just like any other roster. I mean, I'm actually the odd one out, being the only non-contracted guy. Like, I belong just as much to New Japan as I do to Impact, and vice versa, and MLW or something like that. So I feel like Impact, with like a full roster of contracted, and most of them exclusive guys, it's the same as AEW, same as WWE, and a lot of the guys are making about the same like types of money that they would in the other companies, save for like, top tier guys and say like a WWE, who are on like, $500,000 or something like that.
Yeah.
But there's some high earners in Impact too. So it's like, in that sense, the only thing that separates the three is really just presence. So I guess they would all still be, what you would equate to Major League, along with say like New Japan, and probably like a AAA and CMLL, because they have their distribution deals, like whatever their programming is on, they have their contracted roster, and whoever watches them, and then you can kind of let the chips fall as it may. I would almost say MLW is like more like a high grade independent, in that, yeah, like everybody is sort of not necessarily exclusive, except for I think a handful of guys. Like, there's a short list of guys. Everybody else is people that kind of go in and out of like Japan, Mexico, other indies, or even other major companies. And nobody's like 100% exclusive except for like a few people. So I feel like that might be more like that if that were my definition. But yeah, I
Right,
would say
because
like if you built like a trifecta in America, it would, you know, it'd be it would be, you know, WWE, AEW, Impact. I feel like Impact is sort of like the ECW of what would have been like the late 90s, you know,
yeah,
whereas like WWE and AEW are like the WWF/WCW. It's funny though, because I feel like AEW is more like the WWF. Like they have the younger roster and like kind of trying to do edgier stuff, and WWE is like the old guard, which is what WCW used to be.
right.
But it's, you know, they're the ones trading big bombs, and then, you know, whereas before I thought Impact in the early 2000s, they were like the WCW of you know, when they were getting to the mid to late 2000s. So I just think that is more like we swapped spots with like what AEW is now.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing, because I was reading something the other day, and that's why I asked that question, is because you know, somebody said, yeah, Impact's like a indie wrestling. And like I said, I mean, so I view Impact the same standard as like WWE, AEW, New Japan, MLW, like ROH, stuff like that, like as top tier shows.
Mm.
And like I said, I've always been a fan of Impact, you know, TNA Impact. And, you know, there's a lot of people saying like, well, TNA used to just bring older guys in, you know, guys that, you know, just took spotlights from younger talent. And I never viewed it like that. I never did. You know, I think
Right.
AJ Styles pulled through that, you know, and he was the face of that company for the longest time. You know,
Yeah.
Chris Daniels, a lot of people don't even realize he's 51 years old. And that dude just continued to go like he's a young gun. And
Yeah. I mean, that roster at the time, and you know, whenever I do interviews and have to kind of expand upon like the X division, things like that, and like a recent thing that like my take recently, because like a lot of people view like say the X division title is like sort of like an alternate, like a cruiserweight title, like the junior title in Japan and that sort of thing, which I guess is valid if you only look at it in the context of like guys size, because typically it's a lot of like juniors, but there's been a lot of heavyweights, you know, Joe heavyweight. I feel like Chris Daniels is really more like a heavyweight. Frankie Kazarian's really more like a heavyweight. So there's been a little bit of column A and column B, but I think a more apt comparison is the X Division title was more like this past generation's, like what we used to view the Intercontinental title as. Like we
yeah.
used to look at the Intercontinental title, and that was like the working man's title. Like all the badasses had that one. You know,
Oh
Bret
yeah.
Hart had it, Macho Man had it, Shawn had it, Mr. Perfect had it. You know, Austin and Rock had it before they were like ready for the top spot. Like all the great dudes had that title. And so I feel like the X Division title was sort of like this, like the 2000s generation of what the Intercontinental title was, because it was like, you know, you had AJ, you had Joe, you had Chris Daniels. These guys were the X Division guys. Chris Sabin, you
Alex
know,
Shelley.
Alex Shelley, Petey Williams, you know, myself, like, and a lot of these guys, you know, like, you know, Joe, AJ, myself, like guys went on to like WWE. Obviously, Christopher Daniels now in AEW. So like, I felt the same way. Like I never thought that like having Sting or like Kurt Angle or Hardy or like any of the guys there, like it was never. I don't think that capped any of us at all, because we all ended up going on to great things anyway.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you know, a lot of people never saw AJ Styles actually leaving TNA to go to WWE. And I
Yeah,
think AJ has had one of the best careers in WWE since he came there.
no,
Um,
absolutely, yeah,
and it was kind of a bummer because I remember a couple of years ago when you were in WWE and you were doing 205. There was rumor going around, and this is before I got back on social media. There was rumor going around that they were trying to look for a spot on the main roster for you. Was that actually
yeah.
true, or was that just a rumor going around?
No, that's true. I left because there just wasn't a fit. 2018, maybe the beginning of 2018, I think it was. Uh, I met with Vince in London. We were doing London Raw or something like that, and I knocked on his door. I would talk to Vince once a month, maybe once every 6 weeks or so. Just sometimes I didn't even need anything. Just it was just good to talk to him and have that sort of relationship with him, you know.
Yeah.
And but you know, I told him just very honestly, I said, I feel like I'm wasting your money. I don't feel like I'm worth anything to you, and I don't want to waste your money. I all I am right now for you is a good wrestler, but your entire roster is full of good wrestlers. You have them everywhere. I told him I feel like what made me unique, it was what I was coming through the Cruiserweight Classic, but when I got to Raw, we separated me from that. And a lot of that has to do with totally different production teams. You know, I left that team to go to the Raw and SmackDown team, and they have no idea who I am or what to do with me. And he said, okay, well, you know, how can we use you better? And I said, I'll show you. And I spent a year, you know, putting together appearances and things with like the Filipino community and charities and the same groups and organizations that do, say, like Filipino Heritage Night at, like, I don't know, like a Golden State Warriors game, and there's like food trucks and charities outside, and then they have special shirts for like the first however many through the door. And then like they'll do meet and greets with Asian players and just make it a thing. And I got these groups interested in wanting to work with WWE, and they can do that before Raw and before SmackDown in, like, you know, Asian communities, like say San Francisco, LA, Houston, Chicago, like different places where there's like a good Asian demographic, and just sort of expand upon that community, and essentially just kind of like being to the Asian American community what like Eddie and Ray were for like Latinos and Mexicans and stuff like that.
Right.
And you know, I expressed them, we don't really have a representative for that, and it's very archaic, and to be honest, a little bit racist to sort of think that like just putting a Japanese wrestler out there is enough to get like, because we're not all the same. Like, you know,
Right.
if you come from Southeast Asia and you're Chinese, or from like Singapore, or like, you know, the Philippines, like in my case, or whatever, Taiwanese, like you don't just relate to Nakamura because he's, you know, Asian in his own way. Like there's some of us that are closer linked together, you know, and then there's some of us that are like worlds apart. And I said there's really not a lot of representation for Asian Americans and guys like me. And so he said, great, this is all great stuff. And, you know, he kind of loved the portfolio and the package, everything I put together, and all the people that wanted to work with him. But in Vince's mind, creative drives the boat. The creative is the horse that drives the business cart, which is, you know, smart, fair enough, and whatever. It's his company, it's his investment. So I agreed, and he said, well, we need to move you to a different show to get a bigger reach. And I think it was for Raw, really, it was the idea that he had. So he asked me to write some stuff and pitch things, and we'll see what comes up. And you know, I wrote for everything. I wrote big stories, wrote small stories. You know, any person on any roster in any of the rosters, NXT, SmackDown, Raw, NXT UK, 205, I wrote a story for me for everyone on all of them. Big ones, funny ones, like stuff with me and Jinder, or me and Finn, me and Lashley, me and Leo, you know, for the Intercontinental title, or just to get into the Royal Rumble, or just a comedy thing with like Elias or something. I just wrote for everyone. And it just, none of it was a fit for what he wanted to do. And to be honest, you know, the thing is like WWE is a television show. And that is very misunderstood by people that hear that all the time. Because I know fans and stuff, like they'll hear it, they'll even repeat it. And I think in their mind, they think, oh yeah, it's a television show because there's a lot of promos and it's very drama. There's not a lot of like wrestling and cool moves. And that's not what I mean by it's a television show. I mean, like literally, it's a show on television. They have advertisers, they have network meetings, they have investors. It's The Simpsons, it's The Walking Dead. So every year they have to meet with networks to renew deals. They need to meet with Snickers and Pringles and Skittles to work out advertising deals. They need to meet with the venue for the host city of WrestleMania a year beforehand, and SummerSlam's venue, you know, a year beforehand, and Royal Rumble, and their shareholders. And every single one of these meetings includes them, just like a television show, going in, just like Matt Groening in The Simpsons, and saying, this is our show, here's a poster, here's the main characters, this is who the show's about. And even though WWE has 200 people, we are all just Lenny and Carl's. The show is really about Homer, Bart, Lisa, and Marge. Right. And that is Brock and Roman and Charlotte and Becky and
Cena.
You know, yeah. So One, that's something that I feel like a lot of my peers and like contemporaries, they don't understand when they get so frustrated, like, oh, they think they're being smart. They'll go in like November and they'll pitch something for Royal Rumble and WrestleMania season, like as if that's going to change something. But it's like, dude, they knew what this show is going to be a year ago. You're late. You're so late. There's no way that this is going to work, you know? And I feel like WWE tries. Like, I think that sometimes they'll really try to go with something that gets hot, but they can't exceed what they've already sold. You know, Snickers or whatever gave them $1 million.
Yeah.
So if they show up in 6 months, they have to answer to these people that gave them money. The Fox, $1 billion. So Fox bought a poster, and the idea that the show that they're going to produce on Fridays was about Brock and Roman and Undertaker and this. If those aren't the guys on the show every Friday night at 8:00 or whatever, they have to answer to Fox and say, well, we decided to change the script. The show's not really about that. So then, you know, that's the tough part. So, you know, I don't think that all my ideas were good or great. Some of them were probably horrible. Knowing me, I think of the wackiest shit. But a lot of it was that, you know, he already knew he was going to go with. And I can't fault him for that. That's his company. He's made his decisions, and you know, he's going with what he has. So it really just kind of came down to, you know, he doesn't know where to fit that stuff in or how to make it, you know, to put that in, he has to take Finn out of his spot or AJ out of his spot or, you know, whoever. And it's like, these are guys that have $1 million invested in them. You know, that's not a reasonable thing for me to ask or to even suggest. So it just got to the point where he's just said, you know, I don't want you to be unhappy and sit on the bench, but, you know, I admire what you want to do. And so it was like, go out and spread your wings, and, you know, maybe we'll do this again in the future, which is fine by me. Cause I was unhappy and I didn't really want to stay. And I did want to get back to all the other stuff that I thought I was going to do. You know, Regal had talked me into staying after the Cruiserweight Classic, and I was going to I turned down the contract initially. I didn't actually sign my contract until the pay-per-view. What was it? Clash of the Champions. I think that first one.
Yeah.
I wasn't under contract when I won, so they kind of had to talk me into staying.
Well, no, I remember that too. I mean, Clash of Champions is when you fought Brian Kendrick, right, for the title. Yeah. It was at the same. That was the same night you lost the title too, though, right?
No, I didn't lose it until Money in the Bank.
Okay.
Or no, I'm sorry, Hell in a Cell. Hell in a Cell.
Okay.
That's when I lost it.
Yeah, so I remember that. I remember that feud and everything. And, you know, as much as I didn't want to see the title taken off you, I think it was a time where Brian deserved it, because Brian does bust his ass. And I think
it was important for the title to keep moving in the beginning, you know, like the natural order of things. You know, a guy will get called up from an FCW, an NXT, Deep South, whatever, OVW, and they're coming up by themselves. So all eyes are on them, and they're going to come up and they're going to go opposite, like, say, Chris Jericho, right? So they're going to, you know, in all likelihood, it's going to look like this. You know, Elias, for example, will get called up and have to debut, and he'll interrupt a Chris Jericho interview or a promo. So he's going to duel it out on the mic with Chris Jericho, maybe get the better of him. Doesn't really matter if he does or not. Then they're going to wrestle, and he may get the better of him there. And it doesn't really matter if he does or not, because immediately after that, he becomes a major player, because he just went toe to toe with, like, a literal legend or somebody that's a major player right now. So now Elias becomes a household name immediately.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's what they did with Fandango. I mean, when he beat Chris Jericho at Mania.
Right. And so, and think about that. I mean, literally they took like a flamenco dancer and made him a serious player immediately. Yeah. Like, that's a Vegas show dancer, basically. that's when you think about it, that sounds ridiculous, but that is how effective that is, just to give somebody that dedicated spotlight just to do something small or whatever. That's what they get out of it. There's immediate equity with fans. They're like, oh wow, okay, this guy is a guy now. And this is his thing. This is what he does, you know, and whatever. Whereas we were doing it the opposite. Instead of just one of us, there was a dozen of us. And we weren't allowed to rub elbows with the cool guys. We had to stick with each other. So normally if it was say a 1 hour show with a small roster, like how we had, 205 was just a 1 hour show, small roster. So if you go back to say like 1993, Monday Night Raw is like a 1 hour show, small roster. But it's okay for those guys to like build around, say, Bret Hart and have the belt stay with Bret, and everybody kind of loses to Bret for like a year or whatever, because they already know who Shawn is. They already know who Lex Luger is. They already know who Yokozuna is. Like, these guys aren't hurt by losing to Bret, Whereas us, I think to build it around one guy, anytime this is their first impression of us. So if all of us are losing to one guy, we all look like losers because they don't know who any of us are. So I feel like, and it's funny because like we love Neville, like we loved Neville. Amazing wrestler. I wish I could wrestle him every night. But creatively, one of the toughest things that we did was build around one guy. Like when it was just around him, just around Enzo, it was really just kind of those two. After that, it started moving around more. But when the title stopped and built around one guy, but people still didn't know who we are, we all just looked like losers. And then the shitty part is then the one guy, they don't want to see him on 205. They're like, oh, I wish he would just go back to Raw. But it's like, well, then what show are we building? Like, what's the point of doing that?
Well, right. And so that's what I remember did with Murphy and Ali and everybody. They brought them to SmackDown and Raw and then had nothing for them. So it was like they just stood there. And I remember them coming out for promos and stuff and nothing.
Yeah, and I remember that's kind of like what I had thought around the time, that because I was doing a lot of the program with Neville and with Pac. I guess more people know him as Pac now, but and I remember I was pretty much married to Pac for like a year, and I remember thinking like the interest in 205 went way down. Like a lot of wrestling fans thought the show was going to get better, so wrestling fans too, like the diehards, would tune in, but casual fans just tuned the fuck out because we were just losing to this one guy. And then people that knew him from before, they're like, oh, he's awesome now. I wish we got this version of him on Raw when he was there. Let's get him back on Raw. But it's like, if you put him back on Raw, he's going to become the version that you didn't like again, because they're going to feed him to other guys. And that's what would happen to almost any cruiserweight. I mean, to this day, pretty much any guy that came off our show that went to that show, like, didn't really do that well. I think, like Cedric's a tag champ now. That's really good. The Lucha House Party has been doing tag stuff with like some major teams and stuff, and that's pretty cool. But otherwise, like most of the guys, they just flounder. And they did. Oh, Buddy's done some cool stuff with Seth. So a lot of guys, they don't really get a great shake out of it.
Well, Drew was doing the cool thing with Daniel Bryan for a little bit.
And Drew, then,
then now they got that 24/7 championship, and they're just running around chasing after a title. And as much as I love R-Truth, I love R-Truth. I always have. I loved him when he was Ron Killings and TNA, K Quick when he was in the earlier days of WWF. Like, the dude's ridiculously talented, and this is like a spotlight that fits perfectly for him. But you see guys like Carrillo and Gulak and shit like that chasing him around for a title. It's like, dude, you got so much potential in these guys. Cedric was just pushed back. And, they were like, well, we're not caring. And people were getting pissed. And there was rumor going around that he was going to leave. And I remember reading that. And then when the whole thing started with the Hurt Business and he got put in there and turned heel, I was like, this is where he belongs. Because Cedric's a hard fucking worker. Like, one of the best, man. And,
he's incredible.
Besides you, Cedric was one of my favorites in 205. Ali and Murphy, you four. Like, I loved it. I thought it was great. Pac, I enjoyed. I hated the fact that he just disappeared, but I get it. I understand the frustrations. Enzo, I want to say this about Enzo. Great on the mic. Dude can talk for days. But when it came to his in-ring capability, it wasn't nearly as great as what you guys did. And it showed him week after week after week after week. When you were champion, or when Rich Swann was champion, you guys weren't showcased as much as like Enzo and Pac were, which was rough because, like I said, you guys were credible champions. You guys were great. I loved the Cruiserweight Classic. I thought it was fantastic. No offense, but I did not like that championship belt. I didn't, man. I don't know how you felt about it, but I was not a fan. I like the newer design of it. I mean, it still kind of looks the same, but the strap is different. With Santos Escobar, it's a black strap
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
You know, it makes it look sleeker, you know. And when it had the purple strap, I was like, dude, there's no way in hell I'd ever purchase that. Like, you know, but what were your initial thoughts on that belt? Like, were you like, all right, this is cool, or were you like, oh man?
I don't know. I guess I didn't really think about it. The only thing I thought was I liked that it wasn't like how they went like the route of UFC where all the titles are the same with just different colors. I liked that we were like the only main roster title that wasn't just a big W, you know. So I was like, that's cool. And I mean, God, we didn't know that we were getting a title. Like, I literally didn't know and didn't see it until I found out when you guys all found out. When Triple H came to the ring and did the promo and pulled it out of the bag, that's when we found out. I thought I was just going to win this match and get a trophy at the end. That's it. I didn't even know.
Like, when he came out with the title, that was it? Like, you were like, oh, shit.
I didn't know that he was even doing a promo. So when I was waiting for the bell to ring, and then his music came on, time to play the game. And I remember thinking, is this just like a NWO era rib? Like, is he just gonna come out and fucking pedigree us and DX is back? Like, is that what this is? You know? Like, I thought this was like Rey Mysterio getting lawn darted into the truck type of moment. And he came in, you know, in his suit and did this promo, pulled the title out. And then, you know, as he was saying it, it was all new to me, just like everybody else in the crowd. But it, you know, it made sense. I was like, okay, yeah, I obviously this is what they would want to do with it, is make it just so. In my head, I was like, oh, okay, I guess this is obvious. Oh, I still got to do a half-hour match. Yeah, like, I was surprised about it. But I mean, I never really thought much about the title, other than that I was glad that it was at least different than the other ones that were on the main roster. I'm not really much for titles, to be honest. Like, it's not ever really something that I wanted. And so I didn't really put much thought into like having it or anything. I just kind of like, all right, it's here, and it's my responsibility first, I guess.
Yeah. So you just don't care about winning championships? You just want to wrestle? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't like. It's just a storytelling device, you know. I mean, it's like saying I only want to do action movies if I'm the guy that sets off the bomb at the end. Like,
okay,
there's a lot of heroes. You don't have to be Luke Skywalker shooting the things into the, like, you could be Han Solo, like, coming back at the last minute and shooting Vader off its course so Luke can do that, you know. So yeah. Luke gets the title at the end, but you're still Han Solo. Fuck, that's not a bad, you know. We're all just telling stories, you know. And I think when you grow up and you're getting into it, you think like they're only going to do that with the guys who are like legitimately the best. But then when you start doing this, you realize there really is no such thing as the best. You either can do it or you can't. And so many of the variables are out of your control, because a lot of it is selection, you know, based. And so when you think about it like that, and it's not like you don't get like paid more money to do it. So it's kind of like, you know, it's fun to do, and it is something that like I mean, like, I have the titles that I've won like in like my office here, and someday, you know, my future kid can look at it and play with them or whatever, and it's nice for your family to kind of have something to celebrate for you if they're proud. But I mean, it's not something I necessarily strive for, you know. Like, they don't. It's just a storytelling device. That's all.
Well, so you've been wrestling for over 20 years, right?
Yeah,
since 14
now. Yeah.
So when it came down to it, when you started wrestling, like what made you want to get into it? Like, what was your first match that said, I want to do this? Do you remember your first match that said, this is what I want to do?
No, I never had an aha moment, you know. I feel like it just kind of chose me in a way. My earliest memories of wrestling are watching like Saturday Night's Main Event with my dad, like when I'm like 2-3 years old. And I grew up thinking not just I want to be a wrestler someday, and that I will be a wrestler someday. I thought everybody loved wrestling the same way that I did. So anytime I met somebody, I assumed you love wrestling and you're gonna be a wrestler with me someday. Like I like, and it was like, I knew obviously we have doctors, architects, lawyers, firefighters in the world. So there's other jobs and occupations and goals, but I was just so like one dimensional, and it was almost like when it happened, it was a formality. So I just always knew I was going to do it. There was really never one moment that I drew back to that was like, that made me decide I can and will and want, like it was never like that.
Well, who was your favorite wrestler growing up?
I guess I had a lot. I grew up in like the Hogan, Piper, Macho Man, Jake the Snake generations. Those were really like the guys that I really loved right out of the gate. I was always a big Ultimate Warrior guy too. But I think what ended up being my favorites, I had them tattooed on my arm here. So I have Sean's heart, I got Tiger Mask, and then I got the design off Eddie's tights.
That's
and
pretty sick.
These were like my guys, and obviously this is like later Eddie. Like I was already a wrestler at this time, but
right.
Like, LWO Eddie and like Gringos Locos Eddie, like Black Tiger Eddie, like that him and Sean and Tiger Mask really were like my guys.
So how was it meeting your idols then? Like how was it for you when you got to meet them?
Well, let's see. I've met 2 out of those 3. I never got to meet Eddie. It was crazy because his brothers, the family, all were like mentors to me at one point or another in training. Because like coming from LA, we had a lot of the Guerreros come in and out of the gym that I started in. So I had like Mondo around a lot and Chavo Senior around a lot, and I would run into Chavo Jr. a lot at different times, especially that period between WCW and when he went to WWF finally. Like I would see Chavo at like different shows and things like that. And then when I got to Impact, Hector was doing commentary. So I'd sit with Hector all the time and he would kind of like give me advice on things like that. And I never met Eddie. And then he passed away and I never had a chance to meet him. And it was like not long after he passed, I was doing like dark matches and things. I met Vicky and the kids and like the entire family. Eddie's the only one I've never met. Sean was really cool. My match with Rich Swann in the CWC was like Sean's first night as like a producer in the company. Like he was like sort of thinking about coming as a coach, and you heard that he was about to come in. And I just remember we came in for that whatever round that was, the semifinals or like the quarterfinals. And Sean was there, and the producer that I had for that night was actually Terry Taylor, and he was like, Sean's going to sit in and produce this match with me, and he's going to come on board and start working with us and coaching and stuff. And I was like, fuck, man, the greatest. I remember telling Rich, I'm like, we're main eventing a taping tonight, and the greatest of all time is our producer. So if this match doesn't go well, that's definitely on us.
Yeah.
So that was my first time really meeting and talking to Sean, and he was incredibly gracious and nice. And I used to fly back to Orlando after SmackDowns after 205. So we would do that on Tuesdays, and I'd fly on Wednesday morning. I'd fly back to Orlando and spend Wednesday afternoons just sitting with Sean one-on-one in the PC in an office, and we'd watch tape, or he would just give me advice on anything. Sometimes it was wrestling, sometimes it was just life, sometimes it was wrestling life, sometimes it was wrestling politics. There's all kinds of stuff, just mistakes he made, things that he wished he knew when he was younger. And it's crazy because he's actually an incredibly humble guy, which the narrative on him, you would be shocked if you would talk to him one-on-one and see how he really is. It's incredible. He's so amazingly gracious with his time and his tutelage. And
I love Sean, man. Sean's great.
So he's awesome. To this day, I'll still text him if I ever have questions or something like that. And I remember when I left the company, it was like one of my last nights. It was like the Royal Rumble or something. And I remember shortly after, I thanked him. I texted him and said, thank you, for all your advice and your help the last few years. It's a dream come true, getting to learn how to play basketball from Michael Jordan is not something you get to do every day,
Oh yeah.
And he said, just because you're gone doesn't mean you're gone. So, the phone still works. And every now and then I'll still text him, if I need. And Tiger Mask was a funny one. I finally met him in Tokyo. I had a match with Ultimo Dragon in Tokyo for an Inoki show. and Tiger Mask, Fujiwara, and Takayama were all hanging out in one of the side locker rooms in a green room. It's an amazing crew of people. If you know Japanese wrestling, that's like a room full of legends.
Oh yeah.
And Sayama was sleeping on the couch in his suit, and I came in because all the guys knew that Sayama was like my guy, and so I came in to meet him, and he stood up to shake my hand, and I think he had forgotten he had unbuckled his belt before he sat down and kind of took a nap. So he got up to shake my hand really nice, and his pants fell down. He had to catch him and pull his pants up. So I remember thinking that's probably the funniest Meet Your Heroes story that you'll ever have.
Oh, that's awesome.
But he watched my match with Ultimo Dragon that night, and Dragon is like sort of like a student to him in a way. Like he's Ultimo Dragon like modeled himself after Tiger Mask and is really like considered him like a teacher. So it was like sort of watching two generations of students, and he's really nice. He's very complimentary. He liked what he saw and gave me a lot of compliments and a little bit of advice too. And so I've been really blessed. My hero's been awesome to me.
I mean, like I said, I mean, you've had a storied career, and you're still young, so you still got a long way to go. And it's really cool to follow what I've followed of your career. Like I said, I've seen you in Wrestle Society X on MTV when you were under your Puma character, and you did Sadistico in Lucha Libre USA. Which were you the first Sadistico, or was Paul London the first Sadistico?
Well, technically, Sanjay was supposed to be the first one, but he opted out before we taped. So I took over at last minute because he didn't want to do it. So technically it was Sanjay, but I was the first one that you saw, and I did, I don't know, the first season and a half or so, and then Paul took over. Paul really took over when the costume turned blue. That was really mostly Paul. Yeah.
Now, how was it? Because Paul London's one of my favorites of all time. So what was it like getting a chance to be with him? Was that cool? I mean,
Paul's really cool. I first met Paul. He was fresh out of Sean's academy. So I've been wrestling a year or two longer than Paul. And he came to LA, and we had a developmental at the time in LA called UPW. And that was like the developmental before OVW and before Deep South.
Right.
And I was in the same class as like Cena and Victoria. But I was like a 16. Yeah, but I was like a 15-year-old kid. So it's not like it would be like if you put a 15-year-old kid at the PC and let him do NXT tapings. Like I wasn't under contract. I wasn't old enough to be like that, but I was good enough to be training and to be on shows. But that was it. So
we just got 1 or 2 more years, and then Nicholas, who was tag team champions with Braun Strowman, he'll be that kid.
He'll probably be that guy. I hope that he just ends up being so good at all of his jujitsu and stuff like that he can just go into like some MMA and like do some really, really cool stuff. But
I mean, that'll Nicholas put a new taste in people's mouth,
But yeah, I first met Paul there. That's actually where I first met Spanky too. Like Spanky got out of Sean's camp. He was signed with Dragon for a little bit, and then they got released, and then he came to UPW because like he knew that was the new developmental. He was trying to work his way back into the company. So Paul London did sort of the same thing. He didn't get signed, or I don't think he did, but he came out of Sean's academy and didn't really know what to do, and he came to LA, and that's where I first met him. And Paul was, I mean, he's been hilarious since day one. He's so great. I love being around him. And I remember when he did get signed, and he came like the furry boots era Paul London.
Yep.
And I was so happy for him and excited because like the world's never seen a guy like him. And to this day, I still feel like we still haven't again. So he's really one of a kind.
That's why, it's funny because my top 3 favorites, I mean, of all time, and you're in my top 5, top 10 for sure. I love your career. I think it's fantastic. Shawn Michaels, number 1, Van Dam, number 2. And I always tell people Paul London is my number 3. And
Paul's
it's
not a bad choice. Yeah.
Something there was that clicked with Paul London that I was just like, dude, this dude has everything. And I never got to purchase the movie, but I watched clips of Brian and Paul's bogus journey or whatever that they had on what was it? I can't think of the website, highspots.com. They had a movie of it, and just they were high out of their minds, man. And it was the funniest shit, dude. They were talking about ghosts in their house. And, dude, I was like, I love it. You know, I love Paul. I loved what he did in Lucha Underground. That character he had was so cool.
Yeah.
I mean, he's awesome. He's a great wrestler, and a lot of people I don't think would even put him in their top 10, and I think that's a shame because he busted his ass. He's a great wrestler, and it's something that he has, and that's what I saw. And I saw it, and I'm like, dude, he's great. Him and Brian are my favorite tag team of all time.
He's really incredibly talented from a creative point of view. I mean, also from a physical point of view, clearly you can see like people still can't do a lot of the stuff that he does and is willing to do, but creatively, people don't understand like how unique he is and how he sees things. He's an incredible performer up here, and he's really smart, and he gets along with everybody. You know, he's very easygoing. I like Paul a lot.
I remember watching the whole before the Chris Benoit thing that happened. You know, they had that whole thing with Vince where his limo was going to blow up. And if I don't know if you remember this, but when he was walking backstage, Paul is the only jackass with a smile on his face. Yeah. And that was the rumor why he got let go. That was rumored why Vince just was like, I'm done with this shit. Like, I don't know how true it is or what.
No, I think that one's true. Yeah.
But that was rough, man, because I love Paul, and obviously it was just kind of like him being Paul, and you know, but it was good times. I mean, I miss watching him. But
I think that really wraps up Paul in like a nutshell, like his perspective on life. Like, fuck it, why not? You know, that's Paul, and I think that's something so admirable about him. I love him for that. You know,
dude, I'll never forget his debut against Brock Lesnar. Like, you know, this little kid coming in, and I'm like, dude, there was something about him, just something about him. And his tag team with Billy Kidman was cool. I enjoyed that, and but there was something about the chemistry him and Kendrick had. And a lot of people talk their favorite tag teams being the Hardys, Edge and Christian, Legion of Doom. But, you know, if you really think about it, the chemistry that those two had together was just brilliant.
It's funny because like sometimes I think towards like the ends, they would not always get along and they would butt heads on stuff, but it's funny because they're so similar. And maybe that's why sometimes they would get frustrated with each other because they're so similar. But like, I think that's what made them so good, because, you know, most of the time they're always on the same page. And I think what made them so good is that Brian is also that sort of creative. Like they're literally both like human versions of the Mad Hatter, like real life versions. Like both of them think like that.
That would make sense about Paul's gimmick in Lucha Underground.
They both think like Looney Tunes. Like that's how they think, you know. And and so I feel like that's really what made them so successful together, was because like they're so alike.
And that's so crazy because I met Alex Shelley actually at a Black Label Pro event last January. And it was funny because I was waiting in line to use the bathroom. It was a one-person bathroom. And I was next, and he comes out, and I was like, dude, holy shit, it's Alex Shelley. So I talked to him for a minute, and I was like, you know, the Motor City Machine Guns are tied. Like, they're my other favorite tag team. So watching both of them, I always wanted a dream match with that to happen. And he was telling me about how that almost happened, but something came up. How's it like working with Chris and Alex?
They're both very different in some ways, like from like approaching like how to kind of like how to do the job a little bit. Shelley's a little bit more neurotic, I guess. He's more meticulous. That's probably the best way to put it. But I think it also shows in his work. You can see like he kind of has like a more outside the box look and approach to things. And he's got a level of creativity that a lot of people do not have. And I think, and he and I, like, we have a lot of the same interests. So I think we think a lot alike. So I sort of get him in a way. And Saban is very like laid back. And I think what made them really successful is that they balance each other really well. Like at times, Shelly can be kind of high strung and a little bit too meticulous, but Josh is or Saban. Saban is very like easygoing and laid back, and they're very good like the opposite of what you would think oil and water are like. Like they balance each other really, really well. And I think they're different from Brian and Paul in that way, in that they complement each other really well.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I love getting in the ring with both. Shelly being more of a ground-based guy at times is fun for me, because that's kind of maybe more my forte. And I always really liked that Saban wrestled a lot like a heavyweight for a junior. Like he's power bombing guys, and like,
oh man, yeah,
he's strong as a horse, man. And
in interview Styles had, he even said like he hated Saban because of how good Chris was. And
yeah, he's really, really good.
Oh, absolutely. And I remember early days at TNA. I'm like, dude, this dude's fantastic. And just to think, I mean, he's in his late 30s. But yeah. I mean, dude, Chris Saban, I mean, it sucked that he had back-to-back injuries the way he did years back.
Weird. I was just talking to him about that recently at the TV tapings. But he says that this is like right now is the first time he's felt normal in almost 10 years. So he's got some time left to kind of be the Saban that we all love. So and I told him, I said, go back to being that new age version of Otani, because that was sweet when you're like power bombing dudes in the X division. Like he's such a multifaceted performer at like physically, like speaking. He can do so many things athletically. Like he's fast, he can fly, but he's very strong. Like there's not a lot of guys that are built with that many tools.
Yeah. But no, TJ, I got a couple questions to ask you before we head off here, man.
Yeah.
So there was a rumor going around when you were still in WWE that, you got this new look, you have all the tattoos now and everything like that. There was a rumor saying that you had heat backstage by getting all those. Was that a rumor that was true, or was that just kind of bullshit?
I mean, if it was true, it's news to me. I took me like several months to get tattoos cleared, and I went through all the channels that most guys they don't give a fuck. They just go ahead and get their shit done and like figure out later. Like I waited, and Vince cleared them all. And I remember every time I would get a new one, Vince, oh, is that one new? And what's this one? And blah blah blah. Michael Hayes and all the guys. I think the thing about it is when somebody like me leaves and it's not for like contentious reasons, that's not really like a sexy headline. So like when somebody wants to report that, they got to think of something, and it's like, well, there must have been something wrong. And a lot of diehard fans really don't like me, so it's not far-fetched for them to believe something that they already think about me, like that there must be something wrong with me.
No, but why do you say that though? Why do you say a lot of diehard fans don't like you?
I think because I don't like, I've never liked I don't like pandering, Okay. Which isn't to say it's not to say like I like trolling people or anything like that. It's not the case. I just mean that like I've often found, especially like the first half of my career and with the advent of social media and everything, like a lot of my peers sort of put themselves at the mercy of the public. And if you see them in real life, they're like a wreck. Like they're not in control of their lives or their careers, because they're so deathly afraid of sort of not being what they've already pandered to people about. And a lot of them are not what they pandered to people about. And I'm not, and that's not like, I would never want to single anybody out or anything like that, but I'll just put it at that. Like, so I just always thought, well, I don't want to be that way. So like I think a lot of like indie fans or diehard fans and stuff, when they saw, like, I think in the beginning they wanted me to be like their guy, like, oh, this guy can really wrestle, this guy can do some stuff, like he's one of us, he's our guy. But when I would not lean into them and it'd be like, I like you guys as much as casual fans, but I'm not anybody's guy or nothing like that. So then it was almost like fuck you then. and so so a lot of it is like that. And then, beating Ibushi really is like a big thing. People really wanted Zach and Coda. And so like I became the albatross that prevented them from getting that. So a lot of it comes from that as well. And so in the case of like my tattoos, for example, like if you're a fan on the outside, if you don't see me on 205 for like 3 weeks, so you see me at wrestle, then I'm off for like 2 weeks and I'm on, then I'm off for 3 weeks and I'm on again. If I show up one day and I have no tattoos, then I have this whole sleeve, then you don't see me, then I have this whole sleeve. It doesn't mean I didn't go to work that week. You just didn't see me on TV that week. So as I'm getting these, it's not like I surprised Vince one day and showed up with like full sleeves, like surprise, like, he approved everything and saw each of them every week. You guys just didn't see me on TV, but he was watching the whole time. And he would ask me, oh, what does this one mean? Or what is this, like that. So I think it was just one of those things where the context of it from the outside looking in, like, it's like, oh, well, that's
the reason.
He must have gotten in trouble for that, because then it's like, people are like, I can't think of any other reason why he would have gotten let go. But it's like, I stood up and said, I'm wasting your money and I'm wasting your time and I don't want to do that. And here's my best offer. And they said, okay, let's try to make it work. And they couldn't. So they're like,
well, you got let go. When you got let go, you got let go with Ty Dillinger, I believe. Yeah. And I don't remember who the other one was, but it was 3 of you guys.
Kenta.
Yep. Yeah, that was it. I remember
and Moxley too, I think.
Well, he was, I think, like a month before or after, because they were still doing the Shield.
Yeah, they were trying. I think they were trying to, like, they were trying to resign him and he like refused or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's rough. I mean, because I remember watching that and I was talking to my ex-fiance and I'm like, TJ's gone. Like, and I was like, that sucks, man. But I mean, listening to your interviews and stuff, I mean, it just seems like that was your choice. I mean, that you were just unhappy in that position. And
I mean, I had called New Japan and like a year before I left. And I was like, I think I'm on my way out. I don't really know if I want to be here anymore. And I didn't know, like I said, I didn't really know that I didn't expect to be there in the first place. So they pulled us all aside after round 2 in the CWC. I remember I beat Johnny, split my eye open, tore my meniscus in a match. And we're all sitting in the theater, and they have this big theater in Full Sail, like a movie theater. It's a classroom, like a big tiered movie theater classroom. And they had like 4 stations where like different officials from like NXT / the PC or the office, like, we're all at like 4 different desks, and they were calling guys down, like 4 at a time, like 1 at each spot, and giving them their offers. All of us, Coda and Zach included, everybody, except for like the UK. All the UK guys were already under contract, even Zach, but like only for the duration of the tournament. So they, everybody was getting their offers, and everybody most guys accepted because they didn't have a wrestling job yet. So they're like, oh, thank God, I've always wanted to wrestle for a living. But like, Zach, I talked, like, Zach's a good friend of mine. I remember talking to Zach, and he said, I'm going to say no. And I told him I'm probably going to say no too. I want to go back to Japan and Mexico. I've been in TNA for like 4 years, and I was like, it'd be nice to be free for a little while, And they made the offer, and I said, and I also really want to do Lucha Underground. I had a meeting with them. I wrestled Penta on a non-televised thing in the temple or whatever. And they liked what they saw, and they're like, hey, we'll sort out something for you. And I was waiting on that. And I told Regal and them, I said, look, I don't know if I want to stay, and I don't think I do. And it was like later, Regal had pulled me aside and said, you're getting older, and it'd be good for you to kind of stay and ground yourself for a little while. And if you don't like it, make some money and you can leave in a few years or whatever. And I said, that doesn't sound that bad. And so we went along with the tournament, and then they said, well, what do you think? Do you want to stay? And I was in my head, I was like, well, you guys put a title on me. So they FedExed my contract later that week, and I signed it the day before the pay-per-view where I wrestled Brian. And I always kind of knew, like, this probably isn't forever for me. So yeah, I mean, I was ready to go.
Now, you're what, 35, 36 right now?
36, yeah.
So if 2 years, 3 years come down the road and WWE calls you and says, "Hey, we would love you to come back," would you ever consider it?
I mean, we've talked like every 6 months. We'll still touch base with each other and see kind of where we're at. You know, they'll always ask me, "Hey, like, yeah, I don't have any like contract now or anything like that," but they'll always kind of tell me, "Hey, when you're in between handshake deals or short deals, let us know what your status is, you know, just so that just we both kind of know." And I don't think that I would ever not be interested in coming back. I just felt like I had reached a point where I was getting bored and I was not happy and I was wasting their money, you know. So
Now, would you think you'd go back if NXT was the one to offer you the contract?
um that's a good question. I don't know. And you know, I mean, context is changing for me. I'm going to be a dad soon and stuff. So, you know, I think that
Congrats.
like more, yeah, thank you. More than anything else, you know, like having a secure future would probably be more the most important thing. Although, you know, I'm making more money now than I was there, and I was making good money there. It's just, you know, I don't think that's really the issue. But like creatively speaking, I don't really mind anything creatively either. That's the thing is like, yeah, make me the gobbledygooker. I don't care. Doesn't matter. Like that. I mean, we sign up to portray a fantasy. Like
Yeah.
you know, so it doesn't really bother me.
Now, with your entrance music, so I noticed this when I was watching the Cruiserweight Classic, you had a different entrance than when you debuted in 205 Live.
Yeah.
Now, did you get to choose your music coming into the Cruiserweight Classic? Like you said, this is what I wanted, or was that an option that they gave you?
No, they chose that for me. In fact, I asked them if I could just use my Evolve music because
Okay.
somebody had made it for me. It wasn't licensed, and they said, "Well, we'd rather not have to try to go through the formality of the paperwork or whatever." And you know, we already have some stuff, you know. And they played it, and they're like, "Is this cool?" And I said, "Yeah, sure, that's fine." And I mean, it's a cool track. You know, it seems like it sort of like got this weird cult following or like interest from wrestling fans. They're like, "Oh man, TJ's CWC theme was a banger. Like he should have kept that one." Like people really liked that track.
Yeah.
And it was a good song. I just felt like it was a little bit kind of Florida alt rock for me.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't. I don't know that maybe it does suit me, and maybe I don't know myself.
Well, I
But
think your debut in 205 Live, I think your theme music then fit you perfectly because you do have a Twitch account, you do game. So I think that
yeah,
kind of intro was like, this is you.
I think it was great at the time. But I think that from 2016 until now, there's been this revolution of like characterizing what that was. And the reason I chose that was, I mean, yeah, I am a gamer, but like, you know, I'm coming in, I'm like I'm a 30 something year old, like 80s/90s kid that grew up on Nintendo retro gaming and like anime and like a lot of stuff that had become retro, side scrollers, just things like that. And I told them I want to encompass that. And other than maybe Kenny Omega, there's nobody in the industry at all that really like um, captures that sort of generation of fan. Like, and I know Woods really wanted to do it more, and to this day they still don't really have him doing that as far as a wrestling character.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
he has to do it through up, down, down, and all these other third party ways. And so I said, "This is what I want to do," and so you know, I got to choose all that, and I went, you know, to the production people, the stage crew, the everybody. And I said, "This is what I want to do. Can you build these graphics? Can you make this music? Can you do this?" And they said, "Yeah." But now it's like, God, everybody is like, "Hey, turn in a shirt design." Of course, it's going to be an 8-bit Nintendo shirt. Everybody's got one now. So
Right.
now it's like, but in a way, I think it's kind of cool because you know, guys like Kenny and me, like we're sort of at the forefront of like kind of forging that new like look. So now
Right.
it's like, you know, Dakota Kai is a gamer and people can recognize that and identify that now and like people like her and like all these other performers. And I think before that people are like, "You're a gamer? What are you, a fucking nerd?" But like I think but I feel like guys like Kenny and myself, like we made that like cool to do, like, and it felt common. But now I
Oh
feel
yeah.
like, you know, now I feel like it's not special, so I don't I don't lean into it as much. But it is, you know, it's one of the few authentic pieces of me that I was able to put on screen.
I know everybody's doing Twitch and stuff nowadays.
Yeah, yeah.
JT Dunn is one of those guys that I actually been wanting to get on my show because I'm a big fan of his too. And I've noticed he does Twitch a lot. Miro does Twitch a lot. You know, you mentioned Dakota Kai, and I absolutely adore her. I think she's fantastic. But yeah, no, watching that, I mean, and that's what's cool about the AEW video game that they've been talking about is it's going to be kind of like that arcadish old school feel, which is pretty tight. But yeah, no, I mean, when it comes down to your theme music specifically, I mean, what would you say between Impact, WWE, New Japan, like your theme music in general, what would you say is your favorite out of all the theme musics that you've had?
Oof. Good question. They're all very different, and not all totally different, but like slightly. I really liked my second version of my WWE music when they used like more heavy guitar, and it sounded more like in Scott Pilgrim, which by the way, I used Scott Pilgrim as the model for what my character was supposed to be. And it's like in Scott Pilgrim, when they get to the end of the movie in the boss fight, they're using Sex Bomb songs, but like heavy on the guitar and faster rhythm. And so I loved that when CFO remixed it and made it like really heavy on the guitar. I love that one. And I really like my Impact one now because it sounds like the type of song that would have come out of Scott Pilgrim soundtrack. Like the way that it's like very garage band like sounding.
Well, they're both bangers for sure. I love both. I think they're great. So,
and I like Megaran made me my New Japan track, and I think that's cool. The only thing that doesn't, I don't think hip hop suits me as well as like punk rock and that sort of like garage band feel. But a lot of people actually love the Megaran version more than anything. They love that. Yeah.
They were great. I mean, like you said, I mean, I think adding a little heavier to the second version of that was pretty spot on, and it worked. I mean, your entrance still stayed the same as far as how you walked to the ring. You know, you did your dab, which was cool. You know, but a question that I tweeted at you a long time ago. This is before I even started my podcast, and I don't know if you've seen it. Now, when you came into Impact, you started teaming with Fall of Ball. What happened to that? Why did you guys split? Like, what happened there? Like, are you guys still technically a team without being
technically we're still a team. Some of the people in the office didn't understand how a team could be a team if they didn't look like twins, brothers, or best friends and were the same. So a heavyweight and a junior, they didn't understand that. I guess they never heard of Owen and Yokozuna, but whatever.
I mean, I thought it was great, man. It worked so well, and I actually was enjoying.
Yeah, and I think most of the people in the company felt the same way, and some of the office still did, but some of the office just didn't get it, and it was maybe like an archaic way of thinking, but you know, we had also pitched ideas of how we could split up, and they can maybe get something out of that too, and then they looked at us weird, like, we don't want you to split up. You're still going to be associated. It was just like, so technically we're still a team. I know that they really wanted me to sort of, it's funny, like we talked earlier, I said, I don't care about titles and things like that. I know that they really would like me to have wanted to do stuff with like the X title and the world title and like be more of that sort of like guy, which I'm happy to do, but that's not really the first thing I wanted to do. I said I really want to team with Follow. That's what I want to do. And they're like, what about this stuff? And I'm like, no, I want to go with this guy and do that, you know.
And it
so
worked.
I think that is really just sort of a compromise. They wanted me to maybe get a little bit away from that and do some other stuff that they were hoping that I would sort of do. And you know, we'll see what they do from here. But yeah, I think it was just like I sort of had a disinterest in doing stuff with like the world title or the X title a little bit. But you know, I'm happy to do it. The matches are fun. Obviously, the guys are so talented there. More than anything, I feel like the guys don't need me to make those divisions great. I mean, they're already awesome. So,
well, it's just cool to see you on TV again, man. One way or another, it's awesome.
Well, I appreciate that, and yeah, like I know that me and Follow probably still got some more stuff to do. I'm just kind of doing a little creative detour right now.
Well, your frog splash, dude, is there's a twist to it that a lot of people like are like, oh man, it's different. I love it. I think it's great. You know, the Mamba splash, dude, that's fantastic.
Oh, thank you. Thank Lindsay. Actually, he used to do his crossbody like that, and
oh, really?
he used to call it the NBA Jam because he modeled it after that Vince Carter Kobe dunk between the
That's
legs.
awesome.
And I said, so when I left WWE, I told him, I told him and Cedric, I'll do something from each of you guys to sort of keep the bond alive. And I told them to do something. I think Cedric tried the detonation kick once. Maybe he didn't like it because he only did it once. But I told them, I said, let's give each other a little bit of nods here and there. And that was my way of doing that. But it caught on so well, and I really wanted to do the splash and kind of give like a little dedication to Eddie and a dedication to Kobe, especially with his passing. And so now it's become like my move, and so thank Lindsay, he invented it.
I will, man. What did you end up taking away from Cedric? Because I haven't really seen it. So
God, what did I do from Cedric? I'm trying to think of what I was trying to do with him. I can't remember. I want to say I was trying to do his handspring rebounds kick for the longest time, but I just can't do it as well as him. So
yeah, that's
maybe
rough,
it's a good
man.
Maybe it's a good thing that he couldn't do the detonation kick that well, because I can't do his shit.
Yeah, I get that, man. I mean, two different styles for sure, but it works out, man, and that's awesome. That really is. I like the fact that you guys keep that kind of connection one way or another, even if you're not there. You guys do that. I got two more questions for you, man. Yeah, the titles that you've gotten. Obviously, WWE does replicas for the champions, and you obviously have your cruiserweight title. Do you get the same kind of stuff with the X Division Championship and all that? You get replicas, or do you not?
I know some guys had like gotten actual like secondary versions of their titles before, like other different times in the company. I have the old blue X title, the one I got from Suicide, but it was something that was like given to me by like a belt maker because they wanted some original Suicide stuff. So they're like, hey, we make this, like, because they make belts for like their company. I don't know what company it was, I can't remember, but so that I have a couple titles that were offered to me, like, hey, we recreated this, like, because we want like a piece of that. So like a lot of my original Suicide stuff went to people that were from these like belt makers, and so that's how I got some of the other ones. But I do know some other people in the company have gotten like the originals, or like, because a lot of time they're duplicated 2 or 3 times so that they have extras. I don't have any of the extras, but I just ended up getting those, and obviously my cruiserweight title that I have is just one of the ones the company sent me.
I would love. I keep posting to TNA or Impact, and I'm like, we need replica belts back, because
especially the ones now, they look really nice. I think,
I love the X Division title. I've always been a fan of the look, so I'm like, I just want to buy it, like just the X Division. That's it, man. Now when it comes down to wrestling, obviously you have heels, you have face. You've been both in your career. Mm-hmm. Which one do you prefer, and why?
I probably prefer to be the bad guy, because from a functional standpoint, and I've always been put into the position to sort of be like, you hear the term like ring general. Like I've always been like the pitcher in a match, or like the quarterback or whatever, ever since an early age. And that's not something I like insisted on being. Like I actually don't like being a leader in real life. I hate it. I don't think I'm a natural leader at all.
But I get that.
But people always have put me in that position. I don't know if it's because when I was younger, I was really good at an early age, or because like maybe they thought I was more alpha than I was. But for whatever reason, people have always kind of leaned on me, even more experienced guys. And I do have a natural ability for it, so it's not like I don't enjoy it. But anyway, that's like sort of always been my natural position in what we do. And it's just like any other sport, even the most successful guys, just because you're like a top guy or like a really successful or even a legend doesn't necessarily mean that you're a quarterback in the ring. Sometimes even those guys are like the Jerry Rices or something. They still need a quarterback to really kind of set them up. And that's not because they're not good. It's just, that's not their natural disposition. being that that's usually the role I am, it's easier to do that as a bad guy. So I enjoy being a bad guy more because I can control those things and put the other guy in a position to be successful and to lean into his strengths more and to get him where he needs to be, which is what I enjoy. I don't necessarily enjoy trying to make myself into a star either, which is tough. You know, that's what a babyface's job is to do. You know, you got to do that. And I've always been better at doing it for somebody else.
No, I mean, I love that. I mean, like me for a fan, when I first started watching wrestling, obviously it was back in 2003. I was only 12, I think at the time. You know, I was always a good guy fan. Like if you were a bad guy, I was like, get off my TV. I don't want to watch you.
Right. Yeah.
Obviously now, like, Mr. Kennedy and MVP were my first two heels that I fell in love with. It was something about them that they just did something with the crowd, like boosted the audience. And I'm like, dude, these guys are great. I'm a Packers fan, so hearing Kennedy say from Green Bay, Wisconsin was awesome. Yeah. And then there was just something about MVP. And then obviously throughout the years, I've watched stuff from the 90s, 80s, 70s, stuff like that, you know, and I boosted my career with wrestling goes. And heels are fantastic as long as they're portrayed the way that they should be. Because some heels, it just does not flow naturally. You know, and I've seen both of your work. I've seen you as the good guy. I've seen you as the bad guy. And I think one way or another, it's just the way you do it, like the way you connect with what you're doing, it works very well regardless. Like you could be face, you could be heel, and it works. That doesn't work for everybody. And I want to say that's why a big reason why I'm a big fan of yours. So.
It helps to be polarizing, I guess.
Yeah. But yeah, no, man, absolutely. And you know what, dude, this was a total honor for me to have you on here. Like I said,
thank you very much for having me.
You're truly one of a kind inside that ring. And I love everything you're doing. But anybody, go ahead, follow TJ on Instagram, follow him on Twitter at MegaTJP. I do know you do have a business, detonationkick.com. Is that what it is?
Yeah, but everything, you know, because of the pandemic and everything, like everything that I was producing, like in the factory and all the drops, I just moved it over to my pro wrestling tees. So if you find my pro wrestling tees under TJP, then you can find all that stuff there. And then I should have some new stuff up on the Tokon shop for New Japan. And then obviously this is like the new shirt on Impact's thing.
I do like that one a lot. So
I'm on a lot of different stores, I guess. And then my Twitch is also Mega TJP. So yeah,
I don't have Twitch, so I didn't know that. So
no worries.
But I appreciate it, TJ. Thank you very much, man. Anyway, tomorrow, guys, I will be interviewing Shane Taylor. Monday, I'll be doing John Schuyler. TJ, this was fantastic. Thank you so much, man.
No, thank you very much for having me.
Bye, guys.